Because, yes.
Like Clay is putting it, it goes beyond coverage.
Exactly.
It's not enough to just say that if it is coverage, we give them the airtime. There comes a time when you need to also track. You need to do follow-up. But then you see, when it is consistent, you want to cover the standard gauge railway and the progress, then you want to introduce another spin of politics, which is going to sway people here and there, and people can easily, not follow exactly what the very important message you want to put across.
Okay.
Yes.
Although on the railway, I think I've got to add that
yes.
One of the things that I found out has really been missing consistently. It's mentioned once in a while, but most of the time it's missing, is a discussion of the economics of the railway. And the fact that the World Bank actually told us we don't need to build another railway next to our existing railway. That there was no economic case for it. There has been several workshops and stuff discussing this, but not really given prominence. So we are celebrating every time the government announces they're extending this thing, as if it's a good thing. But actually, what it ends up being is us throwing money down the drain.
But economically speaking, isn't it important that we have the standard gauge railway? Because if we're looking at, moving containers from Mombasa to Nairobi, being reduced to 6 hours instead of 2
Again,
days.
it's funny. Nobody moves goods on a bullet train. And we could really achieve a lot of that metric that they've put for standard gauge railway by upgrading our standard, our meter gauge railway, which Brazil, for example, has and does very well with. At a fraction of the cost. We wouldn't have needed to borrow 2 trillion or whatever, however many billions we're borrowing, to do that railway. We could have done it at, I think, like a tenth of the cost by upgrading what we currently have. And that was the argument even the World Bank was saying. Fix what you have, don't build a new one.
But all right, Ruby,
I think we rely on World Bank. What are their interests? Again, and who is behind, the standard railway gauge, and what is our intention? So again, it's good for media to interrogate who is behind the issue. I mean, if it makes sense to us, then who is World Bank to, not in a bad sense, but to sway our viewpoint. And you see, the idea of the media telling stories from different angles is to more or less keep those issues visible in our minds, increase our literacy, media literacy, to understand things from different perspectives. Not tell us what to think about, what to think, but what to think about. So if you give us the multi-dimensional approach, you give us the economic approach. I read with the Uganda pipeline deal, it's still related in terms of compensation for land. Give us that dynamic for us to be able to say, oh, that's why Uganda is doing this, or that's why, so that we are able to get the different side of the story.
So at least everybody by now knows that the standard gauge railway is a 472-kilometer rail that we're looking at from Mombasa coming all the way to Nairobi. At least that fact is very clear, and it might cross over into Uganda at 609 kilometers or thereabouts. But let's now move on and take a look at the other issue you just mentioned, which is about the pipeline deal that also seems to have put Kenya in a position of nearly begging Uganda. Uganda is behaving like the girlfriend who has 2 options and they do not know which side to take, because they're trying to weigh their options. So, Clay, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this. What do you think about the pipeline deal and how it's been covered across media?
I think when this thing came up last week, or was it 1.5 weeks ago, about Uganda going the Tanzanian way, everybody actually was caught by surprise. Where everybody was surprised, because all this time we've, or the Kenyan media actually, or let me speak for myself, the Kenyan media generally, we knew that the whole thing was the BFFs, that Mr. Kenyatta and Museveni, and everything was going to go the Ugandan way, and all of a sudden we hear about this Tanzanian thing. So I think what probably the media should have asked is, we should have questioned our leaders. What have you been telling us about how do you relate with these 3 other countries in EAC or EAC, all of, the way it is? What are our interests actually being looked after? What are our strategic interests? What are we likely to gain or what are we likely to lose? I mean, I think this is where we never probably push the government for more information on what is going on. I think we relied so much on what we had always been told, like, oh, Mr. Kenyatta has gone to Uganda, they've inked some deals and all that.
Right.
So I think the only thing is that I'll speak for the media. The government, so many people speaks for it, it's not even sure what it is saying. Yeah.
There's so many mouthpieces.
Yeah. So I think the media, we did not ask the questions early enough. So this thing caught everybody by surprise. But right now, I think we're scampering, and we actually have not put a finger on what really the problem is. Is it cheaper for Uganda to go the Tanzanian way? What will Kenya lose if actually Uganda is not a part of this thing? So all these are things I think we need to talk to respective ministers or respective ministries and find out the facts or what is going on, and then we can relay that to the people. So I think right now we've not gotten that thing yet.
All right, Professor Orina, do you have something to add regarding the pipeline deal? Because what we're seeing right now is, as early as October of 2015, the news was actually broken that Uganda was also exploring options of having this pipeline constructed through Tanga and into Uganda. But it's only until last week that we saw it, come up in the media, and yet Uganda met this decision in, I think, September or October, early October of 2015.
See, you know that because you have sources in Uganda.
Definitely, it is so interesting for Uganda's turnaround. Kenya has been touted as, despite the fact that we have issues back at home, out there we are touted as economic giant in this region.
The powerhouse.
Yeah, powerhouse. So when Kenya is nearly begging for a small landlocked country that depends on our it's interesting. It's interesting that when for some reason when Museveni says that the pipeline through Hoima, Lokchar, and then
Lamu.
to Lamu has got a lot of bottlenecks, including insecurity, the place is not developed enough, and protracted land disputes, conflict along that line. And now they also depend on our railway that connects all the way through Malaba.
Yes.
So there is something that we are not understanding, which perhaps would want the media to prod more. What is it that what is Kenya's interest in the whole of this lapset idea or the pipeline thing? And now Uganda seems to be looking the Tanzania way. Perhaps it could be that Magufuli looks more serious. He's hard working, and back at home we are still running up for the bid for the second stab at the presidency.
So could it be that maybe we are underestimating the fact that President Magufuli could now, be saying, enough Kenya, it's time for Tanzania as well to take up the powerhouse of East Africa position. Maybe he could be saying that, directly.
Actually, Magufuli is the third force. He's the upcoming third force here, and he seems to be very calculated and kind of shrewd. And most of the time Tanzanians seem to be kind of laid back and easy, not necessarily looking at things from a very more shrewd manner. So I think that's one of the things that we did not take note of, and he's just coming too fast, and it's just moving too fast for everyone, including the Tanzanians themselves. So I think that angle of the story, just trying to investigate from Tanzania what exactly are their next moves, should probably have been a major story that the media would look into. And secondly, of course, the international interests, because I tried to Google search more about the story, and I got one from Financial Times that just explained it clearly. US interests in Kenya. with the railway. Then there is the Talo and the Chinese interest,
Right.
and how is that interplaying? So maybe as we tell the story from the policy actors' point of view, where they're meeting and having discussions and cocktails and shaking hands, the story should be what is the dynamic here.
The dynamic, exactly. And Patrick, I would like to hear your thoughts regarding the fact that when the LAPSET project was being initiated in 2013, the idea was to improve trade within countries Ethiopia, Kenya, Uganda, and South Sudan, and then excluding Tanzania. And now that Tanzania is trying to, take its place now and saying, you know what, we can actually backtrack and say, bring out the statement that, while you might have left us out, we are still important to the entire project. But with the pipeline deal, I think the issue is what happens if Uganda decides to go with Tanzania?
That's a good question. I think, firstly, with LAPSET, Tanzania was never going to be involved in LAPSET because this is the Northeast Corridor we're looking at, and the countries to our north. But it was obviously, as with the development of Mombasa and of Lamu, was going to put a challenge to Dar and to the Tanzanian ports, of course. But I think in terms of the pipeline itself, which we need to distinguish from LAPSET.
Yes, but it was meant to complement.
It does
the
complement it, but we've got to distinguish it. The pipeline itself, one thing you've got to remember, this is as designed or as mooted, was going to be the longest heated pipeline in the world. It's a really expensive affair, And as the professor mentioned, there are very many issues along this, not least the land on which it's going to be buried, where it's going to pass. Because there's the Community Lands Bill, which is now snaking its way through Parliament. A lot of guys in the north don't have titles to their land. We don't still recognize community ownership of land. At least it's not been implemented in law, which is partly what the Lands Bill is supposed to do. But that again has taken ages to pass. So the issues we need to be interrogating about the pipeline itself and about its viability, given that Kenyan oil that we're going to be extracting from Lokicha is only viable, commercially viable, when global prices are about $70.
Right.
They are now, about half that?
$40.
So there's really right now no economic incentive to build a long pipeline. What are you going to sell on it? What are you going to take across on it? And these are the questions I would want us as press to be following up, and asking, what happens if the price does not recover in the next 5 years? When these things were being mooted or being designed, we're talking, global prices were at $100. We've now seen exploration essentially shutting down in Turkana. Yes, they're doing some stuff in Kerio Valley. But in general, the pace and tempo of it has been coming down. And in fact, I think it was last year, late last year, the governor of Turkana, Nanok, was saying that he was expecting by April all exploration to have shut down. Because basically there's no money to be made now selling our oil. So when we keep talking about this pipeline, are we talking about something that is actually feasible to do? Then another interesting thing I found is immediately this deal or this I call it an MOU between Uganda and TZ was announced. Some State House guy came on and said, well, it really doesn't matter. Uganda wasn't a factor when we were talking about this paper. He said that.
That is someone from State House?
Yeah, I think someone from State House. I'll try and get the detail. But somebody from government came out and said that, well, it doesn't really matter that Uganda is not on board. And now you're seeing all the moves for them to try and entice Uganda, and they have to ask, why is this happening, and why don't we then interrogate when government tells us things? Is it actually telling us the truth, or is it telling us what it thinks we want to hear?